Muted.
All right, happy Friday, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? We're getting reports of echoing. Okay, great. All right, so today we have quite a bit to cover. Our apologies that we canceled last week. There was quite a big snowstorm. I think a lot of people were affected. So we're going to dive right in to the topics at hand. And the first major topic we're going to talk about is the preparation for the Office of Early Childhood Quality Improvement applications and renewals going live on May 2nd. And these will close or are scheduled to close Friday, June 17th. So I thought maybe we'd start with just a quick overview of some of our application questions. So we're going to go ahead and click on this. All right, so I think a lot of you have probably seen this document at some point or another. We had a large working group who was helping us edit this document. Now this is pretty much the final version. This really echoes what is in the Colorado Shines Quality Improvement Incentive tab. So we control all of the language and text on the QI Incentives tab, because that's actually Easy Connect, even though it's in Colorado Shines. So this is really just the front page that we're all used to seeing for under Colorado Shines Quality Improvement Incentives. And this is going to show the table of eligible funding that the program, the early learning program, is eligible for based on the basic eligibility criteria. And we'll go through that a little bit as well. And it does have some instruction on how to use the application. It really, it starts with a lot of the general questions. These are kind of considered the universal questions. And so for Race to the Top, for example, which of course is on a rolling application basis, these general questions are the only questions that the provider needs to answer, because they basically already qualify as long as they've hit their level 2 or level 3 through 5 to qualify for the Race to the Top funding. We can we're going to go through this pretty high level, but if you have any questions about any particular questions, please chime in. And I'm wondering if Sarah from ECLA or Nicole is on the line, because we can also have them chime in as well. They were some of the primary authors and coordinators of this document. We kind of start with, is your program committed to participating in QI activities? And what's nice about this document, which now you all have a link to, is that it also includes the actual sugar field so that you can easily create reports. We have reports of all the application questions by funding stream, but it just makes it a little bit more obvious, where this information is stored inside of sugar. Most of the application questions really go into the application module, but we do have some fields that actually update the account record itself and the application so that we can keep track of that profile information. So, the next question is, are you intending to submit for a higher Colorado Shines level? They can indicate what level they are going to pursue. Are you committed to ensuring that 100% of staff are registered in PDIS? Does the program have access to internet, a computer, and a scanner? So kind of getting at the technical capacity. How many teaching staff does your program have? This is something that we may be able to replace if we can get this question added to the Colorado Shines profile questions, but right now that is not available. For the what % of your teaching staff has turned over within the last 12 months, we are going to add, please estimate to the best of your ability, because we did get a lot of questions on that one. How many years has the director served in a director position? How many years has the director served in a director position at this program is the sugar field. How many years has the program been in business? How many years? Let's see. I understand that the Early Childhood Council may check my program's licensing history. So just some really general questions here. For program approach, curriculum, or tools, we are happy to add additional options here. So if you have any suggestions on what should be added, please submit that to support@equicolorado.org and we will get those added. It's really simple to do, so just let us know. So you can see we added a few additional items here. As a brand new question, we are adding, how have you engaged with your Early Childhood Council and demonstrated a commitment to quality? This is going to be related to the rubrics, which we're going to go over next. And it just allows the provider to kind of fill in some of those gaps in case you've had staff turnover or different things. It also just gets their perspective. Okay, so then this is only related to centers and preschools. Do you currently use continuity of care practices? And we will be including a definition there. Do you currently use primary caregiving practices? And we will be including a definition there as well. The ratios we are actually removing from the application because that information is available via licensing very reliably, and also we don't know of anyone really using these pieces of information. All right, so for Race to the Top, it's really important to note that we have already extended the Race to the Top end date for all of the funding streams to June 30th, 2017. Because that is in essence the same funding program, and we don't want to award the same provider additional funds unless they meet that very specific criteria around they initially qualified for a level 2 award, and then through the process they maybe achieved a level 3 or a level 4, and then they qualify for a second allocation of funds. Otherwise, a provider only gets funded once through the Race to the Top grant. So this is just some language around that. For the CCAP QI program, it's really around the commitment to maintain CCAP agreements and the plan to continue to enroll at least 8 children receiving CCAP. This is being changed from 3 children to 8 children in this fiscal year, or in this upcoming fiscal year, so just keep that in mind. That is something that will need to be communicated to providers. Under school readiness, there's a new question. On average, how many hours per month does each staff member typically spend on training and or planning time? And for ITQA, let's see, here it is. Does your program have capacity to increase your number of classrooms for infants and toddlers? How many classrooms could you add? Does your program have the capacity to increase your number of licensed slots for infants and toddlers? How many can you add? Increase CCAP slots for infants and toddlers, and how many can you add? So a lot around access, increasing access. And then what resources do you need to add the infant toddler slots or classrooms you indicated in the questions above? All right. Let's see. And then the primary contact, that is going to remain the same. The page will remain the same. So primarily, everything is really remaining consistent with last year for the application. Are there any questions on the application questions? Or would anyone like to speak up who's been part of the process of reviewing the application questions, rubrics, or MOUs?
This is Rebecca from ECPAC.
Hi.
Hi. Can you go back to the page with the Race to the Top deadline extension text?
Let's see. Yes.
I don't remember what page number that was.
Here it is.
Right there. Yep. So I'm wondering sorry, I'm just reading it again. So I believe most counselors, I know a few of us, have a spending deadline of around mid-April timeframe-ish. And so I'm wondering if there's a way to include in there that while funding is available through June 30th, that doesn't necessarily mean that the spending opportunity is available through June 30th, right?
Oh, yes, definitely. So this text will not be shown on EC Connect. This is just a note to us internally as council. So we can put in some information on the landing page, probably this home page up above, that kind of maybe talks about the race to the top availability. So here maybe I'll add insert a sentence regarding RTT funding.
And honestly, I think that applies to all of the funding streams.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so the MOUs are typically, in effect for a full fiscal year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that spending opportunities are available for the full fiscal year. Again, we have a spending deadline.
Right. And so the only dates that the providers will see are related to those requisition expiration dates. So, and you can always update those as a council if you'd like to. So the provider will have clear expectations that the spending needs to occur by that spending deadline, but that the MOU is in place, from July 1st through June 30th.
Perfect. Yep, perfect.
Great, thanks for those clarifications.
Yeah.
Okay, great. It looks like we got a question. Are programs able to just go to the QI tab and apply, or do they need to update their information under the application tab in Salesforce or Colorado Shines first? So yes, they do need to update their program profile if they have not done so within 90 days. So the part of the eligibility process is that they need to have just checked that they have updated each of the sections of the profile before they can see the funding that they are eligible for. Does everyone know what I'm talking about with the checkboxes at the top of the Colorado Shines, or does anyone want to see that on the screen? So, and then I guess, so what they would need to do is just go through the Colorado Shines application. We are working with OEC to see if we can change the language so that it's considered the Colorado Shines profile as opposed to application, because we want to avoid anyone accidentally submitting or resubmitting for an L3 through 5. So we will be working with them actually on Monday to kind of talk through some of the logistics related to that. But the most important thing is that, they just need to verify everything is still accurate and then check the box at the top, go through each of the tabs, and then they will be able to see the funding that they are eligible for. All right. There's another question. How have you engaged with your early childhood council or other partners in the past year and demonstrated a commitment to quality narrative? To me, this looks like two separate questions. Okay, so Tiffany was asking about that. So let's pull that section up. So it's down under. Here we go. So we can put in a comment here. And we can have that work group kind of look at that as a question. I think the idea is that this narrative allows them to provide some information that will help you as a council to score them against the rubrics. So maybe we can jump into the rubrics here. And then we can kind of kind of address that question. So, and just as a reminder, this document has been emailed out to the Sugar user list, so you can open it and view it. There are a lot of comments across on the side, so you can actually make comments, but at this point, this is pretty final. This has been worked on since around February, and we do need to implement this for the May 2nd launch, so we really can't be making a lot of changes at this point. So one more question came in from Lisa asking around if they need to just submit the checkboxes and not hit the submit button. That's one of the details that we're going to be talking with OEC on Monday about. If we need to understand the technical implications of if they hit the submit button or if they don't hit the submit button. So that's one thing we're working on Monday. Additional guidance will be sent out once that is clarified. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with school readiness as the rubric. So these are still labeled draft, but they're pretty much in their final state. These look a lot like last year, but they're a little bit more clarified, and they really are based on data that you have access to in Sugar. So for example, the OEC high needs score, that's something that OEC calculates in Salesforce based on a whole bunch of criteria. It's really based on the high needs self-reported data that comes from Colorado Shines. It also includes census tract data and CCAP data. So that's a really great number to use to figure out if that site is serving a high need population. And that is available in Sugar. The quality improvement need based on previous quality ratings. So in all of these, you're really going to see that lower quality sites are receiving higher numbers of points, so that we can really make sure that those highest in need and lowest quality are the ones that are getting a large amount of funding. Sustainability and potential investment value, this is based on the number of years they've been in business. Program had identified a formal curriculum and or child assessment approach used. And this is just sort of a yes or no. This is really specific to school readiness and what its grant objectives are. Staff professional development and planning time, that is based on a question as well. The points adjustment for alternative pathways, excluding QualiStar ratings. So this is something that's new that we put in based on a lot of feedback. So for programs that have achieved a Colorado Shines rating via alternative pathway, 10 points will be deducted from the overall rubric score. The council has the discretion to waive this deduction if the program is deemed to be in significant need of quality improvement funding. So that just helps kind of, even the playing field for those who are maybe well-funded and have that alternative pathway already. But you can decide if that doesn't make sense for your council or for that particular site. And then council discretion, this is really where that question on the application comes in. How have you engaged with your early childhood council and demonstrated a commitment to quality? So if we come back over here, we can see that this is really around the commitment to quality, communication, participation in PD and other events. So this is totally your council's place to kind of award 6 additional points based on your discretion and your experience with that site. So that's why there's that narrative here. Pause because I see a couple of questions coming in. One second. Okay, so Sherry is asking, please clarify what you said about updating profile within 90 days of what? So the check that we do on the Colorado Shines QI Incentives tab is that the 5 tabs in the Colorado Shines profile must have been updated within the last 90 days of that day. So of today, go back 90 days. that's what it's checking. Does that make sense, Sherry? Yes, okay, great. For the next question, what if programs have already applied this fiscal year? Do they still need to make sure they update their Color to Shines page by May 2nd? Yes, so, and it's not necessarily that they have to update their Color to Shines page by May 2nd. May 2nd is just when the application will be available, application or renewal. So they will have until June 17th to get their profile updated and their application or renewal submitted. So likely you'll want to communicate with your providers in the next week or two, letting them know that the spring applications are available and are due by June 17th. And this is really done because historically most QI applications and renewals were processed before the new fiscal year began. And last year was an exception because of all the new development that was happening. So this way, you'll have all of your providers kind of signed up, most of them with executed MOUs before July 1st, so you can really hit the ground running in July with the new program year. Okay, so the other thing that we added here is the maximum awarded points. So it just makes it a little easier to do the math. And there were some changes here on the bottom that these application rubrics are used as a guide to rank applicants and are not a final determination of grantees. Other factors that will be considered, we might need to look at this edit. Oh, here we go. Include the quality and thoroughness of each applicant's qualitative responses in the application. So, so just a couple of tweaks to that footer from last year. Are there any questions on the CCAP rubric before we move on to the school readiness rubric? I'm sorry, on the who are here first. They're all very similar. So you'll see there are a couple of things that kind of differentiate the rubrics. But for the most part, they're really, really similar so that you can kind of think about this as branches of similar programs. For ITQA, it's a little bit different because there's a lot of emphasis on the capacity to expand slots for infants and toddlers and kind of how many infants and toddlers they're serving. All right, so are there any questions on any of the rubrics? And just a really big thank you to everyone who helped with this process. This was a pretty significant undertaking to work on the application questions and the rubrics and the MOUs, and it was a big group of people who came together to provide all of these great edits. So thank you to everyone who participated. If there's any burning changes that you feel are necessary, please let us know as soon as possible because these are being implemented as we speak. So, all right, let's see. Any other questions? Okay, fantastic. So next on our agenda here is an update on the OEC MOUs to providers. So these are still being finalized by the Spring Applications Working Group. The goal is to have a universal MOU for each grant with the ability for each council to send out a secondary customized document if needed. So really, the state has a desire to really kind of create some uniform parameters for all councils. And then if your council has something a little bit more specific or special or something, maybe because of the way your council is legally structured, you need to have a couple of more terms or different things like that, then you will have that ability to send out sort of a package of 2 documents as opposed to just 1 document. So we do hope to get these finalized really, really soon. They have been being worked on actively. So hopefully we will be able to get those out to everyone by next week. Looks like we have a couple of questions coming in now. Let's see. All right, so Kristen is asking, will programs need to have 8 CCAP children instead of 3 to get RTT funding? So Kristen, I think you're talking actually about just CCAP funding. So last year the eligibility for CCAP was 3, a minimum of 3 CCAP children, but that was increased to 8 by the Office of Early Childhood this year. I think that there's still some deliberation on whether or not home providers who have a smaller number of CCAP children may be able to qualify, and there might be exceptions made on a case-by-case basis. So we will kind of wait on some more official guidance on that. But Race to the Top actually has no parameters around the number of CCAP children, so just wanted to clarify that. Okay. So based on the rubric, home providers would not qualify for CCAP unless they serve 8+. Correct. Yes, so as it stands right now, the standard is 8, mean CCAP enrollment of 8, but we are awaiting some clarification on whether or not there would be an exception for home providers. Okay, actually that's a very recurring question, is that CCAP number also required for family child care homes? So it sounds like there are some questions around that home. What would people want to see as opposed to 8? Would you want it to see for home providers it should be 3 children again, or do you have a different number in mind? 3+, okay. Okay. Okay, so it's looking like 3 or more for home. So we can bring that feedback back to the state. I do think that we've expressed that already, and so there was some, they are just taking that back and considering that. So it looks like we have one suggestion of 2+. So we'll readdress that and hopefully get some clarification the next week on that eligibility number. Let's see. I think I might have missed a question here. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments on the CCAP number? So Jessica is suggesting maybe if it could be a percentage of children, that way it can vary depending on the size of the child care site. That's a really interesting question. I think that might be a little bit variable, so it might be difficult to track their actual enrollment and what the percentage of the mean CCAP is in the enrollment, because the mean CCAP is 2 months in arrears and the application is as of that date. But that is a really interesting suggestion, so we'll bring that up as well. Okay, great. All right, so questions on the MOU process. You know, again, I think the state is working on having these universal MOUs to drive some consistency. And then still allowing for some flexibility based on the ability to have that secondary MOU document. All right, great. No questions there. So just wanted to clarify, too, that the applications and renewals that are launching on May 2nd, you know, Race to the Top, of course, is just a rolling application, so it's going to continue to be a rolling application and really look exactly the same as it has previously. There will need to be a process if you have a Race to the Top recipient who has not expended all of their money or coaching hours by June 30th, then we will need to send out an MOU amendment that extends their QI dollars and coaching into the next fiscal year, because the current Race to the Top MOUs only go through June 30th. So we can help with that process. We'll probably cover that on next week's call. And then for CCAP, it has not been on a rolling basis historically, but will be going forward. So as of May 2nd, the CCAP application will be available on a rolling basis based on that mean CCAP enrollment of 8 or more. And we'll see if there's an exception for home providers, so we can look into that. But that those applications will be on a rolling application basis so that you can continue to accept programs into the program if you have available funding throughout the year. So a question came in, can we close our CCAP if we reach our capacity instead of letting it roll? So yeah, so everything is controlled from the funding stream record, so you could actually change it from a rolling application to an annual application. But I think, and we can get clarification on this, but my sense is that the Office of Early Childhood is really interested in knowing if there are sites who are interested in participating, even if the funds are not available from that council at the moment. That would be an opportunity for you to waitlist that site and potentially even request additional funding to support those waitlisted sites. So I think there's some desire to have a good understanding of how many sites are really wanting to participate in the program, so that we can really have some great data to share with the legislature, since CCAP is a state general funded grant. Having those waitlist numbers really help describe why this funding is so important and necessary. So we can get some clarification on that. Okay, so under, of course, for ITQA and school readiness, those are going to have the application or renewal window of May 2nd through June 17th. And that's going to work just like it did last year for those grants, where if there's a site who's renewing, the application name will have renewal in it, as opposed to if it's a brand new site, it will have application in the name, so it makes it really easy to tell the difference between your renewals and your applications. And that all of the, all ITQA and all school readiness and all CCAP providers need to be scored against that rubric. And that rubric score does need to be entered into the application module. All right, let's see. So we're getting some questions. One is from Sherry. So regarding an MOU amendment, if funds are not expended, let's see. I'm not sure exactly what your question is. So if funds are not expended by the end of the year, the only grant that would allow you to do an MOU amendment with that provider is the Race to the Top grant. All other grants just operate just like they always have, where all of the funds need to be expended before June 30th, 2016, and anything that's not expended, for the purposes, disappears, right? And then you start your new grant year. So your new grant year for school readiness and ITQA and CCAP, those are all going to have their own new fiscal year 16-17 MOUs. Okay, so we have a question around the clarification of deadlines. Let's see. Race to the Top QI application spending must be completed by June of 2017. Should sites working on a level 2 wait to fill out Race to the Top QI application until after May 2nd so they have time to spend Race to the Top money? So I think there might be some confusion. So let's back up a second. So Race to the Top, the actual grant is extending through June of 2017. The application deadline has nothing to do with Race to the Top, because Race to the Top does not have an application deadline because it's a rolling application. So Race to the Top should be awarded as providers meet the level 2 or level 3 through 5 levels, and then you can consider Race to the Top sort of a merit-based award. And so those can be awarded as soon as those providers meet those goals and apply for the funding. If you have a provider who's applying for Race to the Top within the May 2nd to June 17th window, that would operate just the same as it would any other time, where you would be able to still allow that provider to spend that money anytime between now and June 30th of 2017. Does that help clarify that question, Tina? Okay, so we got another question, which is, with the CCAP application being a rolling application, with all the QI coaching still need to be spent by June of 2017. So yes, even though it's a rolling application, you would still need to be expending all of the grant funds within the grant year, just like a normal grant. Another question came in, when do we need to start using the rubric? You will want to use the rubric after June 17th. So you want to give all of the providers the opportunity to apply for those 3 funding streams. And then once you have all of your applicants in, there are a couple of reports you can run that will help you kind of sort your applicants and rank them very quickly from a quantitative perspective, and then you can present that to your program committee or whoever helps you make the decision on who should be participating in the program to score based on the qualitative data. So, so you really want to do that after June 17th. Okay, let's see. So here's another question. So if a site has not completed spending of Race to the Top by June 30th, does it go away and reappear? That's an interesting question. So, so Race to the Top just carries over. So any quality improvement funds or coaching funds that have not been expended by June 30th, they don't actually do anything. They just continue forward. So what you will need to do is update the requisition expiration date so that that site still has access to those funds. So a lot of those expiration dates defaulted to April 16th. So if you know that that site has not expended all those funds and you would like to grant them an extension of that expiration date, you can do that, and you just go in and update the individual requisition, or you can submit a request to support to mass update a whole group of requisitions to a new expiration date. So, you know, the actual requisition itself will not change. It's just that you'd want to update that expiration date. We are working on some funding stream enhancements, and actually this is a really good segue to the next section, which will allow you as the council, as your individual council, to go ahead and update the expiration date by updating a field on the funding stream, which will then push down to all requisitions. And that will be true for both your QI dollar requisitions and your coaching requisitions. So we're working on a way to make that even easier, so it's all controlled at the funding stream level. We got another question, will coaches be using this rubric or the council? So it's really however your council usually makes decisions around who should be participating in your QI program. So for example, at our council, what we do is we have a program committee. And so our internal staff really compile everything and get it ready for the program committee to review, and then the program committee will help make the final decision on who should be included in the program. So you might have an internal working group who does that. You might have a committee or a work group that does that. It just depends on how your council usually does that. Okay, so is it possible to have ECLA email all sites encouraging them to update their color to shines by May 2nd or provide a general letter? I think that's a great idea, Tiffany. Let's see. I'm trying to see who from ECLA is on the call. That might be something that Rick and Sarah can help put together. you know, it might not make sense to have the email actually come from ECLA because a lot of sites don't know who ECLA is. So we might want to ask if the Office of Early Childhood would send it as part of their newsletter. And also we can provide most likely kind of a template email that you could send out as a council to all your licensed providers in your area. So you might recall from last year's outreach period that there are several outreach reports in Sugar that you can use to kind of get an email list or a mailing list for a select group of providers. So you can kind of use those reports to send out outreach materials related to the application being posted. And Lisa is chiming in saying that Larimer County plans to send a local email regarding this issue. So yeah, I think it would probably be best received if it comes from the local council. It might be something that the larger sort of Colorado Shines newsletter just lets providers know, like, hey, you know, they're open. QI applications are open if you're eligible, kind of including a quick note from that regard. Okay, so Sherry is asking, how does supporting providers update their profile coordinate with CCR&R required updates? I don't know, would anyone like to actually, Sherry, do you want to talk on the phone? I kind of feel like I'm talking to an empty room. So if you want to speak up and ask your question out loud, it might be a little easier to understand what the question is.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so right now under the CCR&R requirements, we're updating the provider accounts. We go in through Salesforce and then we can update those. We make calls to each of the providers and update that. So anybody on CCR&R will understand that part. So
Great.
So we can certainly encourage the providers to also look at their profiles from, you know, from the council perspective as well. So encourage them to do that. But then there's also work being done from the CCR&Rs to update those. And so when we're in a transitional period from a NACRWare database into Salesforce, in updating those providers, I guess my biggest question is are there different places within Salesforce that will show that the profile is updated and kind of who did it? And I guess it feels like double work a little bit. Maybe we do need CCR&Rs to double check the updates that are happening, but encourage providers to take accountability to update their profiles. So it's a little bit of a question.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think that there's a lot of questions around the specific role that CCR&Rs will play in this annual in these, you know, twice annual update requirements that they've had historically through NACRWare, because now it is so easy for a provider to go in and update their profile themselves. But I think to answer your question, if the profile at all has been updated within the last 90 days, including a CCR&R person updating it on the child care site's behalf, that would count. So it wouldn't be double work because that information would be stored in there. So that's good news. But again, I think, and I'm not sure if anyone from the state would want to speak to the CCR&R, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity that the state has talked about around streamlining some of the processes now that it's a lot. We have these great data systems, and providers really can go in and update their information themselves, and you know, that could cut down on a lot of calls and sort of redundant data entry, you know, in the long run.
But the other comment I wanted to add is I still think that the providers need those supports either from their coach or the navigators at some level, because what they're entering may look correct to them, but really they're not understanding that quite yet. And so, for an example, one home provider has 14 sessions entered in her profile because she was trying to think about it as her schedule for the day. So she has one session, but she thinks in her mind that there's 14 sessions. So there needs to be also some sort of double check by either CC&R doing provider updates, or the coach or the navigator to go in before folks reapply, because the funding is being affected. The amounts of QI dollars that some of our home providers are getting isn't making sense, and it is because there's those triggers in there that they're answering incorrectly on a couple of different things. So just keeping that in mind as the conversation goes forward.
Yeah, that is a great comment. Thank you so much, Sherry. So I think that the process as it's outlined in the current flow is that if a home provider, for example, did apply for funds, and the navigator or the program manager is going to look at that application, they're going to review the application for accuracy, and they're going to look at the requisition and kind of be, they might be like, I don't think that this site really has 10 classrooms, or, the equivalent of 8 sessions or whatever it is. And then it's really the responsibility of the navigator or the program manager to then follow up with that site and say, hey, it looks like there might be something wrong with the classrooms or the sessions. Let me help you go in and correct this so that we can resubmit the application. So the way you would do that is you would change the application status from submitted back to in process, and then you would help the provider go through and correct the classrooms, and then you would resubmit the application. So that will update the requisition calculations. And that way, you're absolutely right. Those sites, many sites still need a lot of support and technical assistance when it comes to completing the Colorado Shines profile and our QI applications. And so that's absolutely a really important role. I'm not sure that CCR&Rs make sense in that role necessarily, because they're not administering the Quality Improvement Fund. So, it's already set up so that your navigator and your program manager are going to get alerts when programs submit their applications. And so then it's really part of the application review period where they would find any discrepancies or anything that looks off, and then follow up with those sites and make any corrections necessary. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, but just one more thought. So then you're thinking about the capacity of maybe your coach or your program manager, which in my case is me. So for me to go through each of those and think about that, it's not going to happen. But if the CCR&R system is going to continue in supporting providers, whether it's updating their profile or in other ways that has been taking place historically, let's really think about how can we plan some training for those CC&Rs that maybe don't have access to this type of conversation we're having today on a regular basis. So we can educate them. We did that with NACOWARE. They were given the tools to go through updates, and they understood it, and so there was training available. And so just more of that, and certainly QualiStar was doing that in the past, but to support that continued training for the CCR&Rs that are just providing supports.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I can't speak very specifically on the CCR&Rs and what training they've been receiving. We only do sort of the provider services part of the R&R. Does anyone have any information on what training CCR&Rs have received in the Salesforce Colorado Shines system so far? I do believe there's been quite a bit of training that has occurred. If anyone has any information on that, please feel free to chime in. But I think also, Sherry, especially in your case, you probably want to reach out directly to your R&R team and see how you might want to collaborate, because, part of administering the QI applications is vetting and doing your due diligence on making sure that the applications or the renewals are accurate and that the requisitions are generated accurately. So whether or not you share that with another agency like a CCR&R, that's really going to be up to your council and how you want to do that. So Lisa is chiming in, using the R&R to remind folks is good. I don't think R&R currently have access to the same information. It is not all the same information being updated, or at least our CCR&R staff permissions, and our permissions have been very different. So that's a good, good insight, Lisa. Thank you for providing that. So I'll add that to the list of things to talk about with OEC on Monday, to talk about these application logistics, to see, you know, if an R&R has already updated the profile information, how can we do a check on that so that we're not doing double duty? Or is the data that's being updated so different that we actually would still need the site to go in and check those 5 checkboxes? Now, if you have a site who's really in a rush, they can check those checkboxes and make absolutely no changes, and that will still trigger that, you know, they can apply for funding. But what we really want sites to do is be thoughtful as they're going through that application. The reason why our application is part of Colorado Shines is so that we can leverage all of those great fields that Colorado Shines has and use that data on the EC Connect application without them having to do double entry. So that's kind of the thinking behind it. So Karina's saying she's in the same boat as Sherry. QI Navigator, Program Manager, Financial Approver, Coach. I don't have enough time in the day. Does anyone else have suggestions as to how to help make this more efficient? Yeah, so if anyone wants to actually talk on the phone, I think this might be a good discussion to have around what councils are doing related to the roles of QI Navigator, Program Manager, Financial Contact, and Coach. I think in our larger councils, these are all separate people, and in our smaller councils, these can often be 1 or 2 or 3 people. And with the volume of activity and dollars being spent, you know, it's really important that you have access to the appropriate level of staffing so that you can really meet the demand that the grants have. Does anyone want to chime in? Okay. I think everyone's being very shy today on the call. Well, we'll let that question sort of you know, sink in a little bit, and maybe we'll bring that up right at the end. We've got about 7 minutes left, so I want to hit a couple of quick things. So we will be populating all of the fiscal year 16-17 funding stream records in Sugar on behalf of all councils for this next year based on this year's records. And so that will include, you know, whoever you have as the program manager and whoever you have as the financial contact. All of that will just carry over into the next year. We'll create new records, with the exception of Race to the Top, which again, those records are just being extended until June 30th, 2017. Any councils that are receiving new funding, like we know that there are some councils who will be getting CCAP QI grants directly this year for the first time. If you could send an email to support at and just let us know some basic information about who's the program manager, the grant lead, and what your total budget is, and we'll kind of get that process started with you. And then just wanted to let you know that there has been some new development going on in the funding stream and requisition modules. These are really exciting new improvements that are being vetted by the Office of Early Childhood and our new Sugar Advisory Group, and they are in active development. So you can completely ignore these new fields. A lot of them actually say new in the field name. They're kind of tucked away in different tabs on the module. So you can, again, ignore them. The roll-up calculations are not fully functional yet. You don't need them for anything at this time. We're making these improvements as part of the scope of work for the EC Connect expansion project that's funded through the Office of Early Childhood, and we're collecting feedback and input, and we'll have the Sugar Advisory Group test the different functionalities before those are released. So just wanted to give you the heads up that things might look a little different. In different tabs, there will be more tabs on your funding stream record and on your requisition record, but you can completely ignore those for right now. Let's see, so it looks like we have some questions. I wonder if there is a way to partner some of these responsibilities with a larger or close council. So that's a really great question. You know, with Douglas County, for example, they were kind of, you know, having a rough time with their fiscal sponsors. So the Denver Early Childhood Council is going to continue administering their CCAP QI funds, and will be helping with their Race to the Top QI funds. And that council is keeping all of the other responsibilities. It's really just around the purchasing and processing of those QI funds. So that's an example of how councils can partner to try and you know, really leverage each other in you know, meeting that need. Are there any other thoughts about that? Okay, so again, if you have any thoughts, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or you can chat into the window. For the last update is around the year-end close. You know, the Office of Early Childhood just sent out a big email with some really important updates. One of them is related to the fact that as subrecipients of government grants, if you are on the accrual basis of accounting, then you can include in your reimbursement request expenses that have been incurred but not yet paid. So that is a really important piece of information, where if you are having cash flow trouble, then it's really important that you consider, if you're not already on an accrual basis of accounting, being on an accrual basis of accounting where you can actually put in the bill into your system, and then you can request reimbursement for that bill or that expense. And then as soon as you receive that reimbursement, then you can pay the vendor. So this is why we've worked so hard to get these really great terms with approved vendors like Lakeshore and Kaplan and Discount, where you know, they give us up to 60 days to pay those bills. And so you can know that you know, if a provider requests that you directly pay Lakeshore, for example, you can put that in to Sugar. You can put the invoice date as the date the expense is incurred, and you can actually bill for that expense to the state before you pay it. And once you receive that cash reimbursement, you can go ahead and pay that vendor. So it really helps alleviate cash flow. This is something that ECLA worked to get clarification on. And so if there are any questions about that, you're welcome to reach out to ECLA or to your QRS coordinator to kind of talk about how your accounting system is set up, and if that might be something that's helpful for you. Kind of related to that, this invoice date field, which is on the spending record, is really important that that matches your accounting system, because that's what's going to make reconciliation easy as opposed to hard. You know, if your invoice date doesn't match the transaction in Sugar, you know, with your accounting system, it's going to be trickier to say conclusively, this is the same as it is in my accounting system, and I'm ready to close this month and submit my financial report to the state. So there, you know, one suggestion was that we update that language to, let's see, to be date expense incurred, which might be a little bit more, you know, contextually helpful, I guess. So if that's something you would all be in favor of, we can definitely make that change on the record where it's saying date expense incurred as opposed to invoice date. So if you can chat in whether or not you think that would be helpful, that would be really great. And you know, the biggest thing is that, of course, you know, Sugar is not an accounting system. Sugar is what's helping us track from an evaluation perspective and a business process perspective the whole QI administration lifecycle. but your accounting system is really your authoritative source of like what money has been expended or encumbered for the purpose of the grant, so that you can then submit for reimbursement to the state. So you really want to be sure that those two systems are matching and in alignment, so that you don't come up with, you don't get into trouble later if you've got maybe back-entered spending records in sugar that are not actually reflected in your accounting system or something like that. Are there any questions?
Yeah, Sharon, this is Sherry.
Yeah.
So the only question, and not to answer at the moment, but just to consider, is so far the documentation required in the reimbursement request that I've been sending and has been instructed that was acceptable was we use QuickBooks, and so we have the detailed expenditures on what has been expended. So my question would be, I don't know how that looks, or what kind of documentation would support that reimbursement request.
Are you on a cash basis in QuickBooks, or
no, we're accrual, and so I suppose there's bills that we can enter bills, and so maybe those bills.
That's exactly right. You would create a bill, and then you would not. You can apply a payment to that bill in a future month. But when you create the bill in QuickBooks, then that will recognize the expense in that month. And then later when you do reimbursement, then you can apply that reimbursement to that bill and pay that bill. So, and I am more than happy to kind of walk through that with anyone. I love QuickBooks. We're still on QuickBooks. We're looking at new accounting software because we've gotten a little bit big. But QuickBooks has so many great functionalities for nonprofits. And a lot of times, you know, a consultant will come in and help you set it up, and it actually is not set up to do everything that it can do for you. Grant, costing, and functional expense perspective. So, you know, that's something I think that EQLA can certainly provide technical assistance on how to best set up an accounting system so that you can really take advantage of you know, tips that will help you manage your cash flow, because you'll have really good records. You'll have a really good understanding of, you know, what your costs are and where it should be applied, and the timing of costs and cash flow and things like that. Okay, great. So another question was, do we need to provide a budget revision since we are starting in May rather than July 1st? So no, you are still funded for each of the grants that you're working in, so I don't think there should be any reason for a budget revision. You can, if you have a specific question, that should go to your QRES coordinator so that they can address any specific budget questions. The last thing, I know we're 4 minutes over, and I do apologize, but I think it's really important that you have the heads up that I was actually curious about when June invoices would be due to the state, and so I did ask that question and got some clarification that in order to receive reimbursement under the regular timeline, final June grant invoices will need to be submitted by Wednesday, July 6th. And if you need a little bit more time, then you can submit by Friday, July 8th. But there may be an additional processing time of up to 10 days because it goes through a different grant reimbursement process. OEC also indicated that they will be sending out a formal communication in the next couple of weeks. They do have to wait to get some additional information from their accounting department before they can release that formal communication, but that is coming, so you can keep your eyes out for that. Great. Well, with that, we are 5 minutes over, but if there are any questions at all, I'm happy to stay on the line for a little while if we want to discuss anything. I think it was Karina who had the great suggestion around how do we kind of deal with all of these different roles and responsibilities of small councils, and another question that came in around if there's a way for small councils to partner with some larger councils to kind of share responsibilities, or even potentially partner with your CCR&R, depending on how they're set up. You know, there might be some room for additional collaboration that's more formalized related to some of the fiscal responsibilities or program management responsibilities, really across the board. So are there any thoughts or comments that anyone has on that? So we have a comment that the coach, the QI navigator, and program manager work very closely to make sure information is correct. And that's true in our council as well. You know, everybody works really collaboratively within the council to make sure that everything really makes sense and is accurate. Any other questions or comments? Well, I know this is a little bit dense with information, so thank you for bearing with us. We will continue giving some more updates next week. And in the meantime, let us know if you have any additional questions. We are really in a period of active development with the spring application launch and the funding stream enhancements. So I know our response time is a little slower. So if you can reach out to peer councils, you know, help each other internally, you know, try and problem solve, that's really helpful. But of course, we're going to try and get back to your questions as quickly as possible. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.